my childhood. I was a good kid, man. I got messed around in life. Tried, convicted, and sentenced to die for a crime I did not do. All before my 18th birthday. I spent 28 years in prison. 3 years on death row.
My name is Randall Padgett. I was convicted of murdering my wife. I was sentenced to death by electrocution in the state of Alabama. I thought, well, I'm innocent. I'll be fine. But I wasn't fine. In the courtroom in the United States, the truth was supposed to be the foremost thing, and it's not. They're just keeping score on who can win this game.
I am Sabrina Butler. I served 6.5 years on Mississippi's death row for a crime I did not commit. In 1989, I was convicted of killing my son. When I made it to death row, I was 19 years old. They put me in a 6x9 cell no bigger than your bathroom. It's like being buried underground with the lid on top of you and you can't breathe. That's what death row is like.
My name is Ronald Eubanks. I spent 22 months on death row for a crime that I did not commit.
I was 9 days from my execution date when a man confessed that he did the murder. And it turns out he's a police officer. He said that he gave his gun to the sheriff, and the sheriff says, "You get the hell out of town. I'm running for re-election right now. We can't have a dirty cop."
My name is Kerry Drinkard. I was arrested and convicted of a robbery murder. I spent almost 6 years on death row in Alabama for a crime I didn't commit.
Hi, everyone. I would like to thank you all for joining us for our second day of our 3-day virtual event. And I would also like to remind everyone to like and share this video, please. We have 3 more speakers for you tonight. First of all, we're going to be bringing to you Mr. Ronald Eubanks. He is a Texas native and father of 2. He was raised in the notorious West Dallas projects. He served 15 years in prison, and then he was classified as a registered sex offender for 10 years for a crime that he did not commit. He is the author of Guilty Until Proven Innocent, which is a personal account of his incarceration and the challenges he faced living as a registered sex offender. In 2014, DNA testing excluded Mr. Eubanks as the actual perpetrator. In December 2016, the Court of Criminal Appeals granted Mr. Eubanks' writ and vacated his conviction. On February 8th, 2017, the prosecution dismissed the charges against Eubanks. He is now a motivational speaker and works with the Dallas Promise, Inc. Welcome, Mr. Eubanks.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Wow, that was welcome. First of all, let me say my name is Ronald Eubanks. I guess my ordeal started in 1992. I was somewhere where I shouldn't have been, and I was accused of a rape crime. Me and another guy, a guy that I basically just met, probably about maybe 2 or 3 hours before we was arrested. And I met the young lady too. And I really would like to say, because I couldn't read and write, I didn't get an education. I didn't listen to my mom, my dad. It set me up on a path to where what happened to me, I played a big part in my eyes. A lot of exonerees probably wouldn't like me saying that, or probably a lot of people wouldn't like me saying that. But I feel in my heart, because I didn't get that education, I didn't listen to my parents, I made it so easy for them to convict me of a crime I didn't commit. Not only convict me, but the guy that I met that night. And I would just like to take this moment out to say, I thank all of you activists from the bottom of my heart for all the work that you are doing for people that are incarcerated. I spent many nights, many nights crying. I was in my cell and I cried so much, I couldn't even cry no more half the time because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't read and I couldn't write. I couldn't even write to ask for help. All I could do was cry out to God because I always felt in my heart that nobody cared about me or people like me. And to be out, to be exonerated, to be amongst people that are fighting for people's freedom, it's an overwhelming joy for me. So I commend all of you. God bless y'all heart. You deserve all the praise for the work that y'all are doing. But I tell you so much more. We must first, in my opinion, start educating our kids. Our kids are the pipeline right to the justice system. That's who's filling up the justice system. That's who's getting killed. That's who's getting beat. We as parents must take it up on ourselves to start doing something different. Us as activists must start doing something different. We must start thinking outside the box because prosecutors or the justice system, however you want to put it, they are moving outside the box. They are convicting people outside the box. So therefore, for us to fight and win this war, in my opinion, we also must think and move outside the box. I guarantee you, everybody that we set free, there's 100 more taking their place. 100 more for every one. So I ask you, how can we win this war like that? To me, it's an almost impossible dream, but yet we are making ground. We must go to the root. We must go to our kids and educate them the best of our ability. Rich people, when their kids get in trouble, they automatically know they want a lawyer. We ought to start teaching our kids, ask for a lawyer. We ought to start thinking like we rich. Because only the rich get justice. The poor, we get numbers. Or we get a life sentence. So I can only pray and hope that we all can come together and start really making a big difference. We need to start doing different things. I made a comment one time that I think we ought to start having jury duty seminar. I think people need to be educated what the word reasonable doubt really means. And still, until we start taking it upon ourselves to love each other as we love ourselves, things will continuously to get worse. No matter how you look at it or what side of the fence you're on, love conquers all. Love truly do conquer all. But I do understand when somebody do commit a crime, they deserve to be punished. But in the same token, people deserve to be punished within reason. I feel like that we need to truly evaluate our justice system, because to me, it's like a third world country. What we have is not justice. A lot of people might feel like it is because we've been brainwashed to feel like it is. But in reality, it's not justice. I spent so many years in the cell. I spent 15 years in the cell. The first time I spent 10 years. I got out and I registered as a sex offender for 12 years, basically. And then they rearrested me for failure to register as a sex offender. They gave me 5 more years. 5 more years. I felt like, to me, I was defeated. I couldn't do nothing else. And then to top that all off, I found out that I was going blind up in this time. You're talking about a blow. To me, I felt at that particular time in my life for the first time, I questioned, why was I here? Why am I going through this? What have I done to society to where they cast me in the land of the lost, is what I call it. After feeling so much pity for myself and crying so much, once again, I truly took a step back and I gave everything to God. And once I did that and made that move, my whole life started changing. The Innocent Project came to see me. They wasn't representing me, but they came to see me because of my co-defendant. And I told them what happened. And they sent me a questionnaire to fill out. Like I said, I still couldn't read. I had to pay somebody, I think $200, a jailhouse lawyer is what we call him, Johnny Cochran. Thank God for the Johnny Cochrans that are locked up, for real. I paid them $200 to fill that questionnaire out. And I didn't hear anything. Until 2014, I heard from the district attorney. And if I tell you there was a release in my heart, a joy that I would never be able to explain, I felt that at that moment, a release. And I'm pretty sure a lot of guys that are locked up right now, they want to feel that release. They want to feel your love. They want to feel that you care, that we care, because I do. I will always be one of them. Until the day I die, I will always be one of them. Because I feel like I left something behind. So I will never stop fighting. I will never give up. I really, truly want to win this war. And the only way we can truly win this war if we come together as one. Because we are fighting a monster. It's not justice anymore. It's a monster. It's out of control. Anybody that feel like that innocent people is casualty, or people getting executed is casualty of justice, God, forgive me. Well, you ought to take their place. because it's wrong. It's not justice to lock innocent people up, to execute innocent people. So I can only pray and hope you hear my prayer and my cry. Everyone that can hear me, please, let's start educating our kids. Let's stop letting the justice system raise our kids. And I like to show you my book. I wrote this book. It's my life story. It's called Guilty Until Proven Innocent, When a Woman Cries Rape. The life story of Ronald Eubanks. I donated all charities to this book to a children's organization called the Dallas Promise, Inc. I gave them all the revenue and everything because I don't want the money. If anybody's going to prosper off of my shortcomings, my pain and suffering, then it should be the kids. You can get this book anywhere, Amazon, Walmart, Barnes and Nobles. And I can only hope you help me support these kids so we can make a difference, so we can stop the pipeline of incarceration. I don't know how much time I don't know because I like to talk. So, God forgive me, I didn't keep up with it. But so if I'm over, please let me know. But
thank you very much for your honesty.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Yes, and we'll bring you back on at the end of the segment for questions and answers.
Yes, ma'am.
And if anyone has any questions for Mr. Eubanks, drop them in the comment section, and he'll answer them at the end of the segment. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so next up, we're going to be bringing you Miss Chinchila Jonesia. Chinchila is the founder and executive director of Right the Wrong Coalition, Voices for the Wrongfully Incarcerated, and Be a Voice Criminal Justice Reborn. She is an investigative reporter, a journalist, news anchor, TV and radio personality. She is also a proud member of PABJ, the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. She is the host of Cries of Innocence from Behind Prison Walls, Nightmares Behind Prison Walls, Voices of Change, Mic Test, Live at 5, and News Forum with Chinchila J. She is relentlessly rebirthing the criminal justice system one city at a time, fighting to end wrongful convictions and advocating for the wrongfully incarcerated exonerees and their families countrywide. Please welcome Miss Chinchila Jonesia.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much. I want to thank, first of all, the National Plus Coalition for having me tonight. And it is truly an honor to be a guest tonight on this wrongful conviction event. And congratulations to Mr. Eubanks on his exoneration. So excited. And on the him writing the book, which is very awesome. And I definitely encourage everyone to purchase his book. All right. I am out of Pennsylvania, and I deal daily with wrongful convictions. Well, my glasses are glowing. Let me take this off. I deal daily in wrongful convictions, day in and day out. I eat, sleep, and dream about these cases. And unfortunately, in this country, we have so many men and women that are wrongfully convicted and incarcerated. It's a shame. It's really a shame. Right now in the United States, since 1989, there have been 2,624 exonerations across the country. And on death row, now look, we don't just have people wrongfully incarcerated, like doing life sentences, life without the possibility of parole. That's considered death by incarceration. And so we have those that are in for life, but then we also have people that have been on death row. And sadly, there have been executions of innocent people on death row. And so it's really sad that in this country, instead of being innocent until proven guilty, it's the reverse. You're guilty until proven innocent. And to put someone on death row and to actually execute them without fully knowing the truth is very sad, because the men that have been executed on death row that were innocent, and later it was found out they were innocent, you cannot bring those lives back, and how do you repair that damage? How do you remedy that? You can't. And even with those men right now that are wrongfully incarcerated, you cannot repair the damage that's been done to their psyche, to their relationships, to their families, their children, their parents, their spouses. None of that damage can be repaired because these men have been stripped away from their life, their livelihoods. And it's a sad, sad situation. And also since 1989, there have been 367 men and women that have been exonerated through the use of DNA. And DNA is a science. It's a tool. And it's a very valuable tool to be used in wrongful conviction cases, simply because there's so many men and women that are saying they're innocent. And DNA is a way to prove their innocence. And in every state across this country, in every city and municipality in this country, DNA testing should always be granted. And unfortunately, in some municipalities in this country, they refuse to allow DNA to be used as evidence. But it's a science that works. And it's a sad situation when you have DAs in this country that will not honor that. And one case in particular comes to my mind with DNA testing, and that is the case of a man in Pennsylvania named John Brookins. His case, the DA, Matt Weintraub, he refuses to test the DNA. And my question is why? I mean, if he is so adamant about John Brookins being guilty and that he committed this murder, why not test the DNA? It makes sense to me, so that to me is a grave injustice. And I feel as though across this country, it should be some type of law in place that DNA testing should be granted. It should be enforced that every prosecutor honors DNA. So that's a goal that we're fighting for with the Right to Wrong Coalition. And there are a lot of other things that we're trying to put in place as far as the laws are concerned, because until we change the laws in this country, we're not going to see much change. So laws have to be rebirthed in this country. And that's why Be a Voice Criminal Justice Reborn, we believe in rebirthing this criminal injustice system one city at a time. And I say one city at a time because in states, there are states, they have their laws set and they do what they want to do. But then again, we have cities and different boroughs and municipalities within these states that have their own set of rules, their own set of laws, like Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where they won't test the DNA. So we need to change laws one city at a time and all the way up to the top level. So city, state, country, all need to be changed. And if we can get it all done at one time on a federal level, that would be excellent. Excellent. Now, let's talk more about wrongful convictions. Wrongful convictions, it not just affects those that are wrongfully behind bars, that have been wronged by this system, it affects their entire family. The cases I've seen on cries of innocence from behind prison walls and on my radio show News Forum that come on and tell the stories of their loved ones, each one is so heartbreaking. And, when you think you've heard the worst case, you haven't, because it gets worse. And it's a sad situation because a lot of these men had children and wives, and they were taken away from them. One case in particular, Herndon Steele, Pennsylvania. He's currently wrongfully incarcerated in Pennsylvania. His son, Akeem, was 4 years old when he was wrongfully convicted. And he's still behind bars now. And it's so very sad because he's been behind bars for 35 years, wrongfully. And Vincent Moto, who I call the Pennsylvania Historical Exoneree, because he was the first person to be exonerated through the use of DNA here in Pennsylvania. And he was just recently honored by the state of representatives, by State Representative Regina Young, who honored him and gave him a citation for his exemplary work in the community as a humanitarian and fighting for other wrongfully convicted individuals right now, and the work that he's doing with Right the Wrong Coalition and Be a Voice. He was taken away from his child. He had an infant. He had other children that were adolescents, and he was taken away from them for 10 and a half years. Came back, they basically didn't know him. And it's so hard to repair damage that has been done to families. A lot of families, unfortunately, don't have a support system behind them when they're wrongfully incarcerated. And the ones that do, it's awesome, like Vincent's family. His parents spent over $165,000 on lawyer fees for him. And just this year, now get this, he was exonerated back in 1996, okay? His record was not expunged until this year, February 2021. And that's a grave injustice. And thank God it's finally expunged. But now Vincent is 58 years old. So, what he said to me when I asked him how did he feel, I thought he was going to be really happy and elated. He said he was emotionless because at this point, he's 58 years old. And he said to me, why would I want to go out and try to get a job at 58? This is the time he should be preparing to retire. And so that hit me like, wow, yes, I understand that. So this man was stripped away from his family, from his children, his parents, and from a very promising future that he had. He was stripped away from the prime years of his life, whereas mostly all of the wrongful convictions happened at a very young age. And all of these men that I have interviewed and talked to, and they were all in their prime years of life. Some at the age of 17, 15, 16, 17, early 20s. Those years cannot be regained. And in the state of Pennsylvania, there's no compensation bill even passed in this state. Go figure. And Pennsylvania has the most wrongful convictions. We're highest in that. And yet we don't compensate in this state. What should I say? They don't compensate, because I have nothing to do with that. It was up to me. Everybody would be compensated the second they get out of prison with a whole entire package plan, because these men have been wronged and Pennsylvania needs to right the wrong. And it's very sad that Pennsylvania is only one of 13 states. And even the District of Columbia has a compensation package. They have the highest in the country that they give to their wrongfully incarcerated people, $200,000 a year. And, most states give like an average of about $75,000, $80,000 a year, but $200,000 a year. I think that does a little bit better. But how can you even put a monetary value on the years that these men have been stripped away and robbed of? It's sad, and things have to change in this country. And in this country, the main reasons of wrongful convictions, let me tell you, number one, is misidentification. You have witnesses getting on the stand and telling police that they saw who did it, and they didn't. Some have been coerced by prosecutors and by the police, offered favors, given favors, and, different offers that, they're telling them they're going to do for them. And a lot of these witnesses already have criminal records, some of them. And they get their records, even, their records wiped clean, or they don't get arrested for something else, or, they make all kinds of favors. And I'm talking firsthand because I've seen it. And it's a sad situation when witnesses get on the stand knowing that they did not see the person that did it. I don't see how they can sleep with themselves with falsely accusing someone of a crime, because now they're falsely accusing that innocent person. And I feel as though those witnesses that do that, they need to be prosecuted once the government finds out, law enforcement finds out, hey, they lied. This person didn't really see this person do this crime because this person is innocent. They should be prosecuted. Also, in this country, wrongful convictions occur from prosecutorial misconduct. That plays a huge part. And I've seen prosecutors just make false everything. Okay? They work with the police that are corrupt. So you got a corrupt police department. You got a corrupt prosecution. And they work together with planting evidence and falsifying records and everything else, misplacing evidence, losing DNA and wanting to retest, and all types of situations and things that they do that is absolutely horrid. And then we have the defense that's supposed to present the best defense possible for their client, but they don't. Okay? They fail to object to things they need to object to. They fail to file the proper motions, and they do it intentionally because they don't want their client to be found innocent. And I'm not just talking public defenders. I'm talking about individuals that have paid top-notch attorneys, $25,000, $30,000 and even more to provide the best defense possible for them, but yet they failed them. And their client was wrongfully convicted because here is this defense attorney that's working with the prosecution and their buddies, or they're saying, we're going to do this with this case, and and they do it because they don't want to see that individual free. And sadly to say, this happens the most to Black America, and Brown America. And it's a sad situation. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of white wrongful convictions, but the majority are Black. And it's a sad thing. So racism plays a big part in wrongful convictions. And we have these prosecutors that are out to just get a win. And that's all they want, are wins under their belts. And they don't care whether it's at the expense of an innocent person. And here's my theory. Here's my thing, my suggestion, what I would do and what I want to see happen. How do we end wrongful convictions? Well, the way to end wrongful convictions is to convict the convictor. So the convictor being the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the witnesses that said they saw an individual commit this crime, and then every other false witness that gets on the stand and perjures themselves, the police that perjures themselves, and the jury sometimes as well. But we really can't blame the jury for what they're being presented with, although there are a lot of wrongful conviction cases, and as a matter of fact, everyone I've seen so far, they've never had a jury of their peers. Go figure that, okay? And that should be mandatory, that every defendant has a jury of their peers, but does not happen in these wrongful conviction cases. And it's a sad thing. So if the prosecutor and all of the ones that had a play in a wrongful conviction, and let's take just the case of Vincent Moto, in the case of Herndon Steele, in the case of John Brookins. John Brookins now almost 31 years. Herndon Steele 35 years. Together that's 66 years. Then we have Vincent Moto 10.5 years. So that would be 76.5 years. If that same prosecutor prosecuted all three cases, and guess what? They are all found innocent after they were wrongfully convicted, but they did a total of 76 and a half years. If there was a law passed that all of these people that had a play in these wrongful convictions, that they would do the same amount of time that these wrongfully convicted men and women spent behind bars, wrongful convictions would end like that, simply because no judge, and that's including the judges, no judge, no prosecutor, no defense attorney, no police officer, none of them want to do time behind bars. So if they knew that there was going to be a repercussion and consequences that they would have to face, jail time with being prosecuted and doing time for every year that those men were wrongfully convicted, they would not wrongfully convict anyone else. They would make sure they have the actual perpetrator. Wrongful convictions would end because we have too many lawyers that are ineffective and too many prosecutors that are corrupt and filled with so much misconduct, and even the judges that sit and allow those things to happen in their courtrooms. It's a sad situation. In the city of Philadelphia here in Pennsylvania, DA Larry Krasner, I am so happy that he was reelected to a second term. During his first term that he took in 2017, in 2018, he formed the Conviction Integrity Unit. And that unit since 2018 have exonerated 23 people that were wrongfully incarcerated for crimes they did not commit. And those 23 people had a total of 450 years of wrongful incarceration. And in this city, let's see, some of the DAs during the time, Lynn Abraham, Seth Williams, and others, and some of these cases, the same police officers had a play. They were the ones investigating, the detectives that investigated these wrongful conviction cases. And this is the thing, that whenever you see a wrongful conviction case, that prosecutor is not his first one. He has a history of them, believe me. Those police officers and detectives, there's a history of wrongful convictions under their belt because it's always the same pattern. And so conviction integrity units across this country, the first thing they need to look at is that DA, that prosecutor who prosecuted the case, and look at those detectives, and then pull all of those cases and review those cases from men and women that are crying innocent. And for a conviction integrity unit, or whatever they're called in other cities, if they don't do it that way, then they're not really trying to find any flaws in cases, because that's the very first place to look. If you have a group of a lot of people saying, well, I'm wrongfully convicted, I'm innocent, and you look at these cases and you see one officer, one detective, oh, wow, okay. The thing to do, go pull all these files, take a look, and I can guarantee you will see that at least one of those detectives are on these files. Same prosecutors will be on these files. And that's the quickest way to exonerate men and women, is to pull all of those files of wrongful convictions, people who are crying innocent, and look at the pattern. And so if this happens next year, we should see across this country way more exonerations than we've seen this year across the country, because we've seen states this year exonerating people who we've never thought these states would do, but they did exonerate people. And that's great. And it's so good that more and more people are stepping up, being a voice for those who are wrongfully incarcerated, because there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And we don't even know the magnitude of wrongful convictions. So I urge everybody to be a voice and get involved with wrongful convictions, because it's needed. It's necessary. Don't sit back and allow this to take place and you know it's wrong. So right the wrong, America.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Jonesia.
Thank
And
you.
we will bring you back on at the end of the segment for questions and answers. And everyone, if you could, please like and share this video. And if you have any questions for Miss Jonesia, leave them in the comment section, and she'll be able to answer them at the end of the segment. Next up, we have Rasheid Coach Edwards. He is an associate therapist, consultant, and hypnotherapist with a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from South University in Columbia, South Carolina. Rasheid has been speaking to diverse audiences for over 13 years. Rasheid Edwards has over 15 years of experience in behavioral and success achievement strategies through speaking and coaching. He believes that the challenges plaguing the average individual is controlled by their perception and thinking related to their circumstances. Rasheed's experience as a coach and hypnotherapist has taught him that we all have unintentionally spent a lot of time programming our minds to work against us. Now it's time to program our minds for success. Rasheid is the author of The Secret Commitment, a book outlining the 7 key concepts to goal achievement and transformation. Rasheid has recently completed a mental health book entitled Mental Health Matters. It was released in April of 2020. In light of the current pandemic, Rasheid is using his skills to help people suffering from anxiety and stress in multiple formats and platforms. Rasheid is available for speaking, and you can find his contact information in our comments. Hi, Mr. Rasheid.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
So I'd like to thank you and thank all of the staff for your diligent and hard work in representing those who have been wrongfully incarcerated. This is a very worthwhile and a very important effort. I think a lot of times in the religious community, people say, but for God, go I. And so these situations could easily have been us or someone we love, if that is not the case. And so I'd like to thank you all for the work and the efforts that you put in really representing and going hard for those who have been wrongfully convicted and those who have been incarcerated. Now, what I would like to really speak to is the humanity of the victims who have been wrongfully incarcerated. So here's the deal. I am a trauma specialist, and I want to kind of outline or give some idea of what trauma is and how trauma impacts the individual. So trauma is a type of psychological overwhelm. All right. If we're talking about psychological trauma, it's a sense of overwhelm. And what happens is an individual, we're all part of one of the biggest functions our mind carries out from moment to moment, second to second, day to day, is that it's receiving and processing all of the millions and millions of bits of sensory data that come into us on a second by second basis every moment of our lives. That's one of the biggest functions our minds, or our brains, I should say, carries out. And so when trauma occurs, what happens is it overwhelms the brain's ability to process. And so essentially, it's kind of like, I think I remember an instructor explaining it in a way that she said, essentially what happens is you're processing all this information. So your brain has like if you would, an assistant that receives all of these files, and the assistant, and this is the sensory data that we have, right? It's like an assistant receiving the files, and every file the assistant gets, that assistant walks it to the file room, which is the recesses of your brain. And it gets stored and filed away according to how your brain sorts information. Now, we'll get into that sorting function a little bit later. But in the case of trauma, what happens is your brain is overwhelmed. And in that particular situation, it's not able to appropriately sort and file away. The assistant is kind of like the assistant is going to the file room and he or she trips and falls and just spills that foul all over the floor, and it never gets filed away. So that's kind of an analogy of what trauma is. So your brain is overwhelmed and is not able to appropriately carry out the function of sorting and filing the sensory data. Now, there are a couple of different ways that we kind of experience trauma. It can be one highly sensitizing event that sends us into psychological overwhelm, like, perhaps seeing someone being accosted, whatever it may be, seeing violence enacted on someone, or being violently attacked, or whatever the case may be. There are lots of different ways, but like it can be a single incident, or it can be a case of multiple incidents that over time became so overwhelming that it puts you at your psychological tipping point. So the way you can think of it, right, is that everyone has a certain amount of resilience, or what we call ability to bounce back, right? And so you can look at it as having a big cup and then a shot glass. Some people are born with a big cup, meaning that, they could continue. If trauma was a drink per se, if it was a liquid drink, they could continue have the drink poured into their cup because they have a big cup. And it takes a while for them to hit that tipping point. But then some of us are born with, kind of like a shot glass. And so it doesn't take as much for us to reach our psychological tipping point where that stress turns into trauma, and then we have a response. But let's just say that, there are two ways. You could have a single incident that's overwhelming, or you could have multiple incidents that over time overwhelm you to the point that you go into distress and psychological overwhelm, and you can't process. And so now what happens is, when you hit that point of trauma, here's the important thing to understand. When you hit that point, that tipping point, and you are now into trauma, your body does something that is natural for it. It kind of disengages, or it turns off or short circuits the prefrontal cortex. And that's what we call the area of the brain that is responsible for what we refer to as executive functioning. So this would be things like rationalizing, making decisions. It also includes your speech and language centers. It also includes your timing. And so it turns off that part of the brain. And what it does is it causes your individual to start functioning from what we refer to as the primitive brain. Now, this primitive brain is very, very confrontational. It's very, very impulsive, because essentially the primitive brain is your survival brain. And so it's your survival instincts. So oftentimes people who have been traumatized, you see that they're very impulsive. They're very emotional. Sometimes they seem very confused, like they can't articulate themselves. They don't really know how to say how they're feeling. And again, I refer back to what I just said. So your executive functioning, that part of the brain that does the logic and rationale and the thinking, it's thrown off. And so you don't think as clearly. You're not as sharp and on top of things as you would be, right? So now you have this issue where your executive functioning is thrown off. Sometimes people who have been traumatized, you'll notice that oftentimes they might say something like, something happened, I was triggered, and I felt like I was right back in that moment. I remember working with a client a few years ago, and he mentioned that this was an individual who had been traumatized because he was in an accident that took the life of a motorist. And so he was talking about he had just left the fish market or something. And so there was fish in the car. And so a lot of times when he smells, when he has that smell or that fragrance of uncooked fresh fish, raw fish, it triggers him and it sends him right back into a tailspin where he feels like he's having that experience all over again. And so again, I refer back to your timing center is part of that prefrontal cortex. And so when you're experiencing and you're under the depths and throes of trauma, you don't really know how to process. You're not able to process time as you normally would. And so this is very important because, again, what I didn't speak of, and I guess I should be saying now, was that, so one of the main functions, in addition to sorting is also part of the threat assessment function that we have. So when we talk about trauma and what happens with trauma, PTSD, and things of that nature, it comes from a natural phenomena that our body experiences, right? So they say back in prehistoric time, there were a lot of individuals, there were a lot of predatory type environments. So you had larger animals preying on the smaller animals. So in the animal kingdom, certain animals adapted certain things that helped them get through this. Like some animals adapted gills so that they could go into the water and be safe. Some animals adapted wings so that they could fly and be safe. Some animals adapted change of color, change of pigmentation, protective coverings over their bodies, and different things. These were all adaptive measures to keep them safe. Now, humans didn't physically experience the changes in the physical body, but what happened was a part of the brain adapted a way of becoming so aware of the environment that it continually assessed the environment for threats. And when there was a threat, then the body would go into this, what we call the stress response, or the fight, flight, or freeze adaptation, that reaction. And so this is a naturally occurring phenomenon. This is how we are wired. So when you are under traumatic stress and your prefrontal cortex shuts off or gets short-circuited, that's not a mistake. And so when I talk about, the humanity of the individuals who have been wrongfully convicted, what I'm saying is that they are literally being injured because typically, I don't care how strong you are, I don't care how resilient you may be and how tough and all of that. When you go into the penal institution, it's a whole shift in your consciousness and your psyche. I've been in, and I'm not saying that I've been incarcerated, but I've visited individuals in correctional facilities, and I can feel the energy when I enter that place. As soon as I get on the other side and I'm there, I can feel the energy, and there's a shift, there's a change in energy. But my point is that these individuals have really been injured in the sense that they have been subjected to a type of what I would say is inhumane or inhumane treatment. Because first off, when we talk about trauma, right? Again, trauma is part of the threat assessment system that we have naturally adapted over time. So when you talk about individuals who are being incarcerated, well, one of the first places that you experience safety is within the comfort and the protection of your home. So when you are dragging someone out of their home, not allowing them to return to their place of safety where they can anticipate and know what may or may not be coming because it's their domicile, it's their place, it's their home. Well, now you've caused a person to be in a place where they feel that they're under perpetual threat. So there's a sense of anxiety and angst that comes with people when they realize they have to be in correctional facilities, and that's kind of what they have to live with. And so it's kind of like in your mind, if you've been traumatized, you can't be at ease. So your amygdala, the part of your brain that sends the signal that you're not safe, it's constantly going off. The alarm is constantly firing off. You're not safe. You're not safe. And so these individuals who are in correctional facilities, oftentimes the majority of them are at such a space of anxiety that they have grown to accept the uneasiness. So when you talk about the anxiety of being in a place unfamiliar, that's not your home, that you don't feel safe in, again, this threat response system it causes you to continually release hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and all of these things, because you're perpetually in a state of fight or flight or freeze. You're perpetually assessing that your environment is not safe. And so what science has shown is that people in these situations, they have larger amygdalas, because the amygdala is the alarm center. And so it's constantly working. And so the amygdala is enlarged because it's constantly sending you an alarm that there's a threat, you're not safe. And so one of the biggest things that I would probably kind of consider when I think about trauma and the criminal justice system, or those who have been wrongfully incarcerated, is I would have individuals look at this notion that our bodies, when we're constantly under threat and danger, and we're constantly releasing these hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and all of the other stress hormones, our bodies become toxic. And this isn't voluntary. This is an involuntary thing. So the only way that you can, and I won't say the only way, but the way we kind of stave off these response systems is that we do things. We call them coping skills or coping mechanisms, but there are a whole bunch of different things that we can do to cause ourselves to kind of become a little more resilient, or in the analogy I use with the cups, kind of pour out some of that stress so that you don't reach that tipping point. But there are things you could do, like yoga, meditation, exercising, mindfulness, qigong, tai chi, dancing, singing, drawing, indulging your passions and your hobbies. But again, an individual who's been incarcerated, they don't have the freedoms that those of us who are in the outside world have. And so they're subjected to other people's terms, other people's edicts for them, telling them what they do, what to do, when, where, and how. And so you really don't have much autonomy. And then the system that they're in, they don't have people who are trauma competent and even understand what trauma is for them. And I dare say, nor do the people involved or in charge even care what trauma does to an individual. And so my point is that the humanity of the individual who has been wrongfully convicted has been deeply impacted, to a point of, when you experience trauma, it's almost as if your brain has been completely rewired. And so there are things that you can do to help overcome and overturn and live a more functional and a more full life. But it takes a lot of time to get through these things. And so it's almost like you've been injured. The same way someone has been injured in an accident, an automobile accident, or any type of slip and fall, or whatever it may be. It's psychological, but a person has been impacted and injured psychologically. And so they don't have the same psyche, the same consciousness. One of the things that I noticed, I had a couple of friends who had been incarcerated, and when they got out, one of the things that I saw in them is that they were behind the times, and they didn't seem to be able to catch up with the times. And as I began to learn more about it, okay, I understand that, when you're being traumatized and you're dealing with these traumas, your timing centers are off. And so it's a lot of things that happen to individuals who have been traumatized, and the wrongful conviction, those who have been wrongfully convicted, they experience a full, a full plate of that. Like, it's so much that they have to deal with. We can't even fathom what they're dealing with. But just the mere notion that an individual can't be at ease because they're always assessing their environment and saying it's not safe is a big deal. And so, with some of the technologies that I use, and I'm not sure if it's okay, but I'll just take a liberty here and speak on some of the technologies that I use. One of those main technologies I use is hypnotherapy. It's one of, in my opinion, because of the work that I do, I think it's one of the, if not the best, one of the better technologies or one of the better modalities for helping people heal trauma, unhealed emotions, stress, anxiety, and a lot of things. And so I guess my time may be running low, but I'll just leave that there. And thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Do we have any questions, Brooke? Hi, everyone. I'm going to look through here to see if I see some questions. And I believe I have one right here from Lulu Love on Facebook. I believe this would be for you, Coach Edwards. She wants to know, how can we help those who are incarcerated heal from the trauma of incarceration?
So there are several things we could do to help them heal. But again, so I come from a space of healing, looking like processing those unprocessed, confounding negative emotions. So trauma, undoubtedly, is a psychological, it's an emotional and a psychological thing that happens, and it affects the mind and body. And so when I was referring to hypnotherapy, what I was referring to was a process that I employ that actually heals these things at a core level. Because one of the things I talked about is that trauma is the result of your brain not being able to process the incoming sensory data. It gets confounded. It's like it's overwhelmed, and then it just kind of shuts off. And so when that prefrontal cortex shuts off, now you're working from your survival brain. So what we got to do is we got to help people heal those unhealed emotions at a core level. And once we get to that, what we're doing is it's like we're breathing new life into the individual. And now they're able to go on with their lives and have a more fuller experience and expression of themselves, their emotions, and what life is and how they live their lives.
Thank you. Okay. And Mr. Eubanks, I had a question for you. I was wondering if you could explain to us exactly what reasonable doubt is.
Well, to me, reasonable doubt, if you have like one person say you did a crime and fingered you out, identified you, and then someone at your resident or whatever that may be say that you was there, that's enough reasonable doubt in my eyes. But nowadays, the way they prosecute us is that doesn't count anymore. As long as someone is pointing the finger that you was there and that you are the person, then that's good enough for a jury or a prosecutor to prosecute you.
Okay. Mr. Edwards, this one is back to you. It says, what is the gist of hypnotherapy and how does it work? And what examples of progress can you share with us?
Okay. So the gist of hypnotherapy is basically I equate hypnotherapy to trance. So hypnotherapy is a way of using a natural phenomena that we experience, which is a trance state. And it takes that trance state and uses it for a functional way of helping people heal. So if anyone in the audience is interested in doing a Google search, look up what the characteristics are of the alpha brainwave frequency. Typically, the way they'll characterize the alpha brainwave frequency is they'll characterize it as a daze or a daydream, right? And so that's like the trance state. You know, if you've ever been like focused on something and you kind of like zone out and you get real deep into it and you kind of, it's almost like if you had a camera lens, right? It's like the camera lens getting focused on something particular and then everything else blurs out. That's the mental phenomena of trance. So science tells us that the alpha brainwave frequency is one of the best frequencies for assimilating and learning and taking on new information. So what I do is I help people get into a trance state I expand that trance state, and then by expanding the trance state, I bypass the part of their brain that's critical, and it allows me to have more influence with them in terms of how I help them heal those, those deeply rooted, unhealed negative emotions. And so I'll try to be as brief as I can, but an example of how I've helped someone. I had a young lady I worked with who had, let's say, she was pregnant, and she was experiencing an issue because the pregnancy was difficult, and the doctor was telling her that some of her symptoms were going to cause her baby to be born with so many problems that he was more or less encouraging her to abort her child. So she was very upset, emotional, and when I spoke with her, she was crying because she was saying she felt like she was mourning the death of her unborn child. And she didn't really know how to handle that. It was too much. So we did a session and we worked on those things that she was dealing with, because she said she was dealing with grief and fear. So we did the session, worked on those things, helped her release those in the session. And afterwards, you could see a whole change in her body. So when I say at a core level, one of the things that she experienced, she was like, after the session, she kind of was shaking her shoulders a little bit. So I checked in with her and asked, okay, what's going on? And she said, well, my body feels so much looser. She said, on a day-to-day basis, I experience the heaviness and the impact of these emotions. And she was like, my body feels loose now. I haven't felt so light and so free in a long time. And so we talked a little bit more, and she was like, you know what? I'm scared to say that it's gone, but I can tell you that I don't feel that fear and that grief right now. And when we started, the fear and the grief each were a 10 on a 0 to 10. So she was saying, I don't want to jinx it. And I understand how people, they want to knock on wood, or they don't want to say something because they don't want it to come back. But her whole expression was bright. She was happy. She was smiling, which before the session, she was crying profusely, almost uncontrollably. So when I say healing it at a core level, that's what I mean by that.
And we have another question for Mr. Eubanks. Do you feel you suffer with trauma from your incarceration, and how do you cope?
Well, I just like Mr. Edwards said, I agree with him 100. I still continuously to battle that demon, to where a lot of different things have set me off. When I hear about people that's incarcerated, or I read their stories, I just hear about them, period, it brings really tears to my eyes, because I can't help but put myself in their shoes, and I can't do nothing about it. No matter how hard I try, it's me. It's me. I'm that person. I'm going through it. I'm reliving it all over again. And the hardest part for me is, I guess I can't get over the hump, is because through the whole process, the whole situation, I'm losing my eyesight behind it, because the medical condition that they failed to give me. So every day I relive this over and over in my mind. And it's like, I can never, ever get away from it, no matter how hard I try, how hard I pray and beg. It's just something that does not leave me. It's always there. I'm always scared to be around a lot of people, because, especially women, because I'm always afraid some woman gonna say, he did this, he accidentally touched me, or he touched me. And when I go out in public, I fear that every day. That's one of my greatest fears, because of my eyesight. And like, if I go in a grocery store, I walk around with my hands in my pocket. It might sound crazy, but I walk around with my hands in my pockets because I have a fear of somebody saying I did something. And that's my greatest fear right there of all.
Okay. And Dr. Chinchilla,
Yes.
I had a question. I just wanted to know, with all the people that you work with, do you notice any of the mental situations that Dr. Edwards was talking about? And if you do, what do you do to provide any type of help for them?
Okay, yes, definitely so, Yolanda. Every wrongfully incarcerated individual, they suffer from PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's just straight across the board. I have not met one exoneree yet that does not suffer from that. And it's normal. It's expected. And some people look and say, wow, PTSD, and they look at it like, well, only people that have been in a war like Vietnam or Desert Storm or something like that suffer from PTSD. Not true. Exonerees do, because we have to look at it like this. When they're wrongfully incarcerated, first of all, being behind the walls, even for a crime that you didn't commit, that you did commit, and you're in there rightfully, it's a traumatic experience because it's not your norm. So for those that are wrongfully incarcerated, they're in there knowing, hey, I'm innocent and I'm behind bars. And so every day they're fighting for their lives, and they're fighting to prove that they're innocent, trying to stay alive within those prisons. So that is definitely a war that they're experiencing every day, every second of the day that they're behind walls. And so when they come home, that trauma is there, just like people that have experienced a physical war in the, in the army and things like that. These men and women, they suffer psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and relationship wise, simply because little things that will trigger off memories of them being behind bars and things that may have gone on behind bars, and knowing that they're innocent, and they had to spend all these years to prove their innocence. And then those that haven't been compensated, that even makes it even worse. But there's nothing that can repair that damage monetarily. So with these men, it's a delicate situation. So a lot of them, they share, how it is in relationships, and, how any little thing could trigger them off. And it's not that they're really upset and mad with that individual, but something may have happened. It may have been something they've seen on TV or heard on the radio at that time that just triggers those memories of that traumatic experience. And so it's so very important for families of those that have been exonerated to really try to be patient and to understand that what they're going through is nothing personal towards anybody, but it's personal within themselves. So it's a daily battle that they're fighting against. And, with Brother Edwards talking about the hypnosis, that's something I really never thought of to actually, utilize for those that suffer in this manner. And it may work. But, it needs to be more. I think if everyone that's a part of their healing process, number one is to try to understand. And we can never fully understand what they're going through because we have not experienced it. But as long as we know, hey, it's a war, because if we look at it like that, they've been through a war, a serious battle. So we have to take time to be patient, to try to understand what they're going through, to listen to them, because yes, they're going to have mood swings. Yes, it's going to seem like they have multiple personalities. Some I call octopolar, because we see different types of personalities, and it's normal because they've been through a serious traumatic experience that we will never understand fully because we have not experienced it. So patience, definitely, for families and friends. If you love them, be patient. If you love them, help them, talk to them, try to understand what they're going through, and don't get so upset because they switch up on you sometimes. Don't get upset with them because it's what they've been through, and it's a healing process that's going to take time. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen overnight.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have another question for Coach Edwards. It says, do you offer services for the wrongfully convicted and or their families while they are still incarcerated while awaiting exoneration?
That is definitely something I'm open to. Now, I would definitely, so here's for the incarcerated, it's kind of a difficult thing, right? Because one of the things that you want to do during this process is you want to find some sense of stability. And so it might be kind of going against the grain to try to offer those services while they're still incarcerated, because they still face the same circumstances that put them in the throes of trauma. But definitely for the families, I will provide services. One of the first services I like to provide for them is an understanding of trauma. Because, like Dr. Chinchilla said, the family members are kind of like the first line. And what I see with a lot of individuals who've been traumatized is they get upset, or they're kind of thrown off by their family members because they don't understand. But the average individual is not going to understand trauma unless they've been trained or taught to understand it. Because, as the doctor was saying, these mood swings and these different triggers and things, they can put someone right back in the space of that experience all over again, just in a second. And so to the untrained mind and eye, the average person would be thinking, why don't you just get over it? Like, why don't you, it's over. But for the individual who's been traumatized, it's not over for them. And as Mr. Eubanks is saying, things trigger him when he hears a story of someone. And again, you can hear that his threat systems are going off, because when he goes in the store, he puts his hands in his pockets for fear that something will happen, and he'll find himself right back in the situation where someone has wrongfully accused him of, and there he is again. So this is real. And so I definitely would love to provide that type of service for the family members to help them understand, just on a basic level, this is what you can expect. This is what your loved one is dealing with. And this is how you kind of make sense of it. No one's going to be perfect with it and be 100% good with it, but having a heightened level of awareness and understanding, it helps everyone, because then you can look at your loved one and understand, okay, that's that, they're feeling threatened or whatever. That's that they're having one of those triggers. And so, yeah, they might be very emotional. They might be very impulsive. They might be lashing out, because this is how you act. This is what the primitive brain does, because this is your survival brain. And this is how you think if you back someone in the corner and they don't have anywhere else to go. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu said you never back your enemy in the corner with no outlet, because they're liable to unleash on you something that you're not ready for. So you always leave them an out. But to the traumatized brain, when they're backed in the corner, they're always, when that threat system is continually alarming, then they're having those experiences repeatedly.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Dr. Chinchilla, could you please tell us the idea of how we can change these laws all at once on a federal level? We need a sweeping change in this country.
Yes, indeed, we do need a sweeping change in this country. The best way to get it done on a federal level is to, like right now we're doing things on the state level. So a lot of people go and they lobby at, in their state, at the state capitol, talking to legislators, senators, state representatives, and then we have United States senators and, the congressmen that we need to be talking to. So we need to start going to Washington, lobbying at the White House on a federal level for things that we want to see change federally. Even like with compensation, it needs to be a federal law that every state should compensate those men and women that have been exonerated. It should be a package in place in every state. And, because right now, different states, they have different prices that different amounts of money they're giving per year. And to me, they're all way under what these wrongfully incarcerated men and women should be given. Because a lot of them have even lost loved ones while wrongfully incarcerated. They've lost parents, grandparents, and, and they couldn't even go to the funeral. And that's very sad. So it's so much damage that's been done. So we need to start contacting and writing, emailing, calling the White House, calling all the different United States senators and everything, and demand to have a meeting. And we need to rally in Washington, rally at the capital of this country to bring about change. And so we need to come together, like the different organizations in this country that are working, advocating for the wrongfully incarcerated. We need to sit down at the table and come together with a plan to get these laws changed and present what we want to see happen in this country. We need to go and we need to present that to the legislators in this country. That's the way to get it done on a federal level, because, you know, at a state level, yes, we can do some things on the state levels, but, you know, we have states that are resistant to change. And so we have to go at it on a federal level. So those organizations that are willing, like with Right the Wrong Coalition, we try to bring organizations together, and we meet on Zoom, and we talk about ways we can make change in this country on a federal level. So if anybody's interested, you know, just reach out. I put the information in the chat, not in the chat, but on the comments on this event page. And we need to definitely come together, because there are lots of organizations now that are fighting for the wrongfully incarcerated, fighting for the exonerees to be compensated. And we need to really come together and form like one big coalition of organizations to fight, because there's power in numbers. And don't ever think there's not, everybody. That saying holds true. There's definitely power in numbers. We can do a lot individually, but if we come together as one and work in solidarity to try to, you know, enact change, then change will come on a federal level.
Thanks. Okay, Mr. Eubanks, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It was truly heartfelt, and I will keep it in mind as I continue studies. Please always remember you are a victim and it is not your fault. That is from Samaya Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
I believe we are out of questions. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Please tune in tomorrow for day 3. We will have another 3 speakers. And everyone, please like and share this video. Thank you guys for all your time. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.